Good morning. No, good evening. Well, maybe it's morning if you are on the other side of the world. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Ayasoma, and to my left there is Bhante Sumitta from Sri Lanka, our most senior venerable monk here at the monastery. And to my right there is Bhante Sultaso from originally the United States, Colorado. He's the only American monk currently at the monastery, but he's backed up by a lot of American lay residents. So I used to say the Americans were the minority at Empty Cloud, but not this time around. We got some backup. So anyway, welcome friends to Monk Chat. So whenever you're ready, you're welcome to type in your questions about Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha, and the residents here are also welcome to ask questions, just as long as it's related to Buddhism. We will try our best to answer them, and yeah, you can type them in. There's no questions tonight. There's just
Sam.
So monastics. Sorry, this is sort of a silly question maybe. Monastics have to be bald, but like almost all of the Buddha statues do not seem to be bald. Why is that?
So that's historical. So in the very early days of Buddhism, it appears that there were no Buddha statues very early on. And Buddha statues were developed after Buddhism had already been around for about 300 or 400 years. And the early Buddha statues were actually made by the Greeks. So little known fact is that the Greek Empire extended all the way into northwestern India. So when the Greek Empire encountered Buddhism, the Greeks loved their statues, and they were puzzled by the fact that the Buddhists didn't have any statues. So they started making statues for the Buddhists, which was very sweet, except that they made it based upon the existing trends in Greek statue making at the time. And Greek statues had hair. So the early Buddha statues all have hair that looks remarkably like Greek statues. So from that also developed the tradition of always depicting the Buddha as having a full head of hair. And that's persisted to this day, with very few exceptions. So you can sometimes find Buddha statues with a completely shaved head, but they're by far the minority. They're not common.
Bhante, do you have anything to add?
Also, the Buddha was living in the forest, and he didn't have the razors probably like the way we have today, and not much access, and also was not very interested in, clean shaven like today. And also in the forest, it like almost all those ascetic practitioners, they would have actually grown hair more like for that matter. But some of those monastics, in the suttas, it is said, Bhaddena yobbanena samannagato susukala kesa. So those very young people in their prime youth, and they also had susukala kesa. It's not just kala; it is susukala, very very dark hair they had, and then kesamasung oharitva. Also, it is said. So they have shaven the head. In the Buddha's case, it is also said he renounced the world, and with him there was Channa and the horse Kantaka, and by crossing the Neranjara river, it is said the Bodhisattva he used his own sword to cut his hair. And he gave all the ornaments and all the sword and other stuff along with the hair to Channa, and he asked to give these things back to the king, King Suddhodana, his father, saying that he became a monk. So he would not be a layperson anymore. That is about the history. And also, yes, as Bhante Sudaso mentioned, at the beginning there were no statues of the Buddha. In fact, it is said after the passing away of the Buddha, still the seat for the Buddha was reserved, but it was just empty seat, because they didn't have any kind of idea how to put something on in that place. So some of them had slippers, and some of them had Dhamma wheel, and so different symbols were added later on, and eventually the statue came out. And even the picture of the Buddha, nobody wanted to paint the picture of the Buddha, thinking that it would be like some bad karma if they don't do it correct. And so also they didn't want to even think of having a statue, because they were always scared of those things. And later on, the wonderful Buddha statue came up from the Greek tradition, what we call Gandhara tradition, and then also there is another tradition called Mathura tradition. So they are very drastically different styles of Buddha statue came up. And when they tried to portray the different characteristics of the Buddha statue became bigger and bigger and bigger, because they wanted to highlight those different bodily features. That's why you see like very tall Buddha statues, giant Buddha statues. They wanted to highlight more and more about the Buddha's different characteristics. So the hair also has, according to Manjusri Vastu Vidya, I think that's a book where we find all the length and breadth of the Buddha, the statue. Like the nose should be like this, the face, the width of the face should be like this, there should be curls like this, and they all had defined accordingly later on. So it became a completely different outcome when it came to an art piece.
Thank you, Bhante. And any other questions? Go ahead.
What exactly were the types or techniques of meditation that the Buddha practiced and that he taught his disciples?
Bhante?
Well, the Buddha himself said that the main meditation technique he used was anapanasati, mindfulness of breathing. Both before his enlightenment and also after his enlightenment, he continued to practice anapanasati. So that was one of his major practices. Also the compassion. So throughout his the hundreds of lifetimes that he was developing the qualities to become a Buddha, he was practicing a lot of compassion. So that's one of the critical qualities for becoming a Sammasambuddha. Jhana, so developing deep samadhi through jhana practice. Anicca sanya, anatta sanya. These are all practices that the Buddha did. So the perception of impermanence, the perception of not self. Yeah.
Yeah. And Roy actually has a question specifically for you. Wants to know the answer from Bhante Sugdasan. Can we learn and incorporate shikantaza into our practice from your experiences with it?
So I think Ayasoma needs to answer the next 3 questions, since she's just skipped 3 questions in a row. 4 questions,
Roy,
actually.
That is actually asking specifically.
4 questions now. She's skipped out on the opportunity.
Multiplying. It's just huge.
Anyway. So Roy asks, can we learn and incorporate shikantaza into our practice? Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so shikantaza is the Japanese name for the meditation technique, which I usually prefer to call it by one of its Chinese names, which is silent illumination. The word shikantaza literally means just precisely sitting, or only sitting, nothing but sitting. And that's actually a very descriptive name, but it's one that people often mistake to thinking it's just kind of lazing about and not doing anything, but that's not quite correct. Silent illumination, I think, is a more descriptive title because it indicates that the mind is silent. It's very quiet and still, but it's also very clearly knowing and clearly aware. So silent illumination is similar to saying samatha vipassana, which is what this practice is. It's a combined samatha vipassana practice. So the combination of concentration and insight. And in the Pali Canon, it's normally called animitta samadhi. So objectless concentration, concentration without any specific object. And the technique the Buddha gives is actually quite simple. He says the technique is to let go of all objects. So not to focus on any particular object. Just let go of all objects without focusing on any object. But the important thing is to keep the mind very awake and very still while doing that. So the practice of silent illumination, or shikantaza, is already spoken about in the Pali Canon. So it's not something, some people say that it was invented it was invented in China 1,000 years after the Buddha or whatever, but that's completely untrue. This is a practice that comes right from the Buddha's own lips. It's from the Pali Canon. So there's no problem with integrating it. One thing that I will say is that it is a very advanced and difficult practice, and I recommend that you start by developing proficiency in object-based samadhi and object-based vipassana before trying to practice objectless samatha vipassana. So object-based samadhi means picking some object, such as your body or your breath, and focusing your mind on it until the mind becomes very still. Object-based vipassana would be something like perceiving the impermanence of all bodily sensations, or perceiving the impersonal nature of all mental phenomena. These are examples of object-based vipassana. So once you have a feeling for what the samatha mind feels like and a feeling for what the vipassana mind feels like, then you can practice a more advanced technique like silent illumination. So objectless combined samatha vipassana. So those are my thoughts on the matter. This is a major component of my practice. So about half of all my meditation time is spent doing silent illumination. And it meshes perfectly with all the other traditional Theravada practices. There's no problem at all.
Thank you, Bhante. And Yudi asks, I asked the question yesterday about Mara, but it wasn't answered or I didn't hear it. Bhante said that Mara is a deva that controls the creation of others. What does it mean, creation of others? I think you had actually answered this question yesterday.
But maybe
Bhante Sumita could...
it's Ayasoma's turn to answer questions.
No, I'm a scientific materialist, so I never put too much thought into other realms of existence. So I think Bhante Sumita maybe can answer for me.
It's about the Paranamita Vasavati.
What does it mean, creation of others? So Mara is a deva that controls the creation of others. What does it mean to control the creations of others?
Like he's not like, I think in this case, he's not like a factory where he produces stuff, but he actually can influence other people in the world. And even today we can see how difficult it is to do good things. It's always challenging to do good things. Practicing sila is so difficult, and practicing meditation is so difficult, but it is so easy to do something wrong, something bad, some anti-social things or something which is more fascinating, and you can also find a lot of friends if you want to do some bad things. The world is always almost more full of bad people, So we can see how he has been influencing, if he has been doing it for sure. And it is very difficult, like the other people, all those good people, they are actually constantly fighting it out. They are swimming against the stream. So that is why they are very rare. But interestingly, those people who are swimming against the stream are much more powerful too. You can see one Buddha in the world and so many other the wrong people. But one Buddha's this great wonderful message has been so powerful. Even for 2,500 years, we still, millions of people are being benefited. And his amazingly powerful Dhamma is really, really amazing. And one Jesus, one Muhammad, or other wonderful religious leaders too, very few. But when it comes to bad people, you can see millions of them. Yeah, so definitely influenced by the Mara. So he can change your mindset. Even if you try to start meditating, then you will feel so many disturbances, so many distractions. Maybe it can happen to you. Maybe something really go wrong, and there can be a lot of things that you don't want to. You want to really give up the meditation. There can be certain points at your meditation. Then you can think, oh, this is that guy, this is the bad guy who is influencing me, and you have to be more determined. And if you are more determined, of course, even the Mara cannot influence you. Yeah, it is your strong confidence and strong commitment that can challenge even the Mara.
Thank you, Bhante. And Gita asks, Venables, do monastics have a Kapya account that lay people can donate to for their personal needs, like toothpaste, shaving cream, soap, medicine, vitamins, etc.? This does. Would you like to answer this question?
So every monastery has its own particular rules around such things. Here at Empty Cloud, we do not have specific personal accounts for the different resident monastics. If you want to make a donation to the monastery, you just donate to the monastery general fund. If you want to ask a particular monk what they need, you can ask a particular monk what they need. But otherwise, you would just make a general donation. Yeah, we don't have personal accounts here.
There is, though, I believe, a general monastic fund, so specific for the healthcare of monastics. So I think you can specify that in the donation if you want to, for it to go for a particular purpose.
I think in the temple also you have the wish list or something.
Yes, and there's wish lists of all the needs, and that's usually every single temple will have on their website a wish list of what a dana list fundamentally. So lots of kind people ask what the temple needs. So we put it up there. And Kanye asks, how do I cope with the feeling? How do I cope with the feeling of shame and depression with the realization I have caused all my own suffering over the years?
Ayasoma?
Because he said that I supposed to, now I want to not answer any question. All right, I'll answer this question. Feelings of shame and depression. Well, what I found very useful in my practice is understanding actually one of the main differences between Buddhism and religions like Catholicism, for example, where there is a big sense of big talk of original sin. So growing up in that country, even though I'm from Italy, growing up in Italy, a Catholic country, even though I had a very secular upbringing, we are culturally Catholic. So fundamentally, up until I started really practicing Buddhism, my life was just marked by this sense of wrongness, always guilty, feeling bad that whether I had done something bad or not. It was very interesting. Apparently, other forms of Christianity and Protestantism don't really have that, because Bhante Sudaso did not have that experience. So he thought it was actually pretty bizarre, which it was, in fact, that I was feeling guilty for nothing. But yeah, definitely, had I done bad things in the past, definitely that feeling of perhaps you can call it shame or guilt, definitely depression would arise in the mind. But in Buddhism, we have this other concept, at least in Mahayana, actually, they use this terminology called Buddha nature. So fundamentally, all our defilements are what are covering up this inner purity, rather than, us being kind of flawed to begin with and trying to, go somewhere else. In reality, Buddha nature is already inside of us. We've just kind of covered it up with all our defilements, a lot of dust and a lot of bad things. And that is actually very, very helpful to, first of all, switch our mind state and start thinking in a different way. That there is something really wholesome there to nourish. And then understanding that is kind of like the human condition, it's actually very natural to make lots of different mistakes, have lots of different defilements and follow them. We have trained ourselves for countless eons. And when we turn around, we kind of see each one of our friends being a nice, cute bundle of greed, hatred, and delusion, with flare-ups of defilements here and there. And instead of starting to judge them as we normally do, we can actually see how we are all trembling together. We can start having compassion and understanding, oh, yes, there are flaws in my conduct, and there are flaws in the conducts of other people around me, and we're trembling together, and we're all trying to be happy. So there's not really that much, it's not really helpful to get into our thoughts. What have I done in the past? Oh, I'm such a foolish person. All that suffering that I've created for myself. Well, yeah, we've all been doing that. But how is it beneficial right now? What are you doing right now? And that's why it's very helpful to take precepts. Because once we take precepts, that's what we're doing right now. Perhaps in the past we've killed countless beings, but right now we're not killing any beings. Perhaps in the past we've stolen, but right now we're not stealing. Perhaps in the past we've done all sorts of weird sexual misconduct, but right now we're not. Actually, in monasteries, we don't engage in sexual activity altogether, so it's great. No problem. Choice is not happiness, so remove that choice altogether. Right? And perhaps we've lied so much in the past, but right now we're not lying anymore. That's great. We're truthful people. And perhaps in the past we were spending all the time, getting drunk and intoxicated in this way, shape, and form. But we're not doing it right now. So what is there to blame? What is there to be ashamed of our conduct right now? There isn't anything to be ashamed of ourselves. So actually we can recollect our own goodness. This is what the Buddha recommends for us to do on a regular basis, and go, yeah, actually doing pretty great. Yes. Oh, that's wonderful. Oh yes, my Buddha nature is shining more and more. And yeah, hey, some defilements come here and there, but I can recommit to the path, and I can recollect that my intentions right now, I have the path, I have the Buddhist path. My intention is pure, and I'm going in that direction. And that is what is important. So in that way, shame kind of starts not having a fertile soil where to germinate anymore. And in terms of depression, really actually start doing good deeds. and recollecting them. Yeah, and then also there, depression has no fertile soil. Depression is a form of self-obsession. So the more we undermine our sense of self, our sort of strong ego, me, I want this, I don't want this has to stop, etc., etc. That's why we live in community, because there's no way to get your own way. Everybody has, even in the kitchen, everybody has a different idea of where things, the residents are nodding this experience. Where's the ladle? Well, today is in this place, then tomorrow is in this other place. Maybe next hour is in another place, also maybe in another room. Maybe someone decided we didn't need a ladle anymore. So yeah, you start learning that maybe actually happiness is not getting things the way you want them to be. So 2 acts of kindness, care for others, and that's also how depression kind of starts fading away a little bit. So I hope that was helpful. And the next question was asked by a friend last night, I believe. And the question was, how do I become Buddhist while remaining Catholic? Am I also supposed to answer this question?
Well, you're the moderator, so you can assign whoever you want to answer that question.
Maybe Bhante Sumita.
Remaining Catholic and practicing Buddhism.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is like if you want to practice Buddhism, you practice 5 precepts, and you don't want to, register yourself as a Buddhist. You practice those 5 precepts, and you will enjoy the power of it. And in fact, in Buddhism, I don't think we have such a thing called we try to convert other people to Buddhism. It is people's pure choice. If they want to follow this wonderful art of living, they can always do that. And I don't think even the Buddha was a Buddhist in that manner. He was so amazingly powerful, and he was able to preach the Dhamma in such a universal Dhamma that everyone could enjoy that. And he would go to other ascetic monasteries, and he would preach Dhamma there. And all those wonderful ashrams, they were really very happy to welcome the Buddha and listen to his Dhamma. And eventually, some of them, they wanted to follow the Buddha, and they did that. And some Brahmins, some Kshatriyas, some Vaishyas, and some Shudras, all the people, many different people from different religious backgrounds, they listened to the Buddha's Dhamma and later followed his teaching. So if you feel comfortable practicing the Buddhism, like meditation or these 5 precepts or any other things, I think for that matter, you are welcome to do so. As long as you feel happy, you can do that. And maybe sometime you might have some issues, then you can think of it what to do. Yeah, and hope for the best. And you are Buddhist Christian or Christian Buddhist or whatever, maybe good to start with. I remember there are fake meat nowadays. What do you call it? If someone wants to convert yourself to a vegetarian, maybe you can use those fake meat. It tastes like chicken. It looks like chicken, and everything looks like chicken, but it's not chicken. So,
Impossible burgers.
yeah.
Impossible burgers.
Yeah. Yeah. So burgers also are there like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you maybe it's kind of a transition time for you to really determine yourself. Okay, it's enough of eating even the fake meat. I will eat only vegetables after that. So you can think that way.
Thank you, Bante. I also just add that actually Catholicism, I have to say that out of all the different forms, I would say that it's the most complementary to Buddhism, especially having spent some time in Taiwan and actually also in Thailand and Buddhist countries. So here in the West, especially if we approach the Theravada tradition, we tend to have this distorted view of what actually Buddhism is. And it's kind of like usually the sort of average Westerner will have this kind of very ascetic idea of very purified, maybe we can call it, sort of version of Buddhism, where everybody is just meditating and following the precepts, and that's it, and zero, like perhaps not even a statue, etc. And then you go to Thailand, and whoo, wow! First of all, like the differences between Mahayana and Theravada start blending. They're not that obvious. There's also lots of different iconography, kind of going all over the place. Also, Ganesha actually seems to be, which is a Hindu god, right? Is that correct? It's pretty, not in every temple, it's very common. There's lots of different spirit houses, different things that we're not used to seeing, perhaps in, say, Thai forest monasteries here in the West. At least I wasn't used to it. And definitely going to Taiwan as well, the blending in of Confucianism and Buddhism. So in pretty much any different country, actually going to the Sri Lankan temples in the West, and correct me, Bante, if I'm wrong, but there's always like a Deva room where there's lots of different statues of a lot of Hindu gods, right? Correct? So yeah, it's not, my experience as a convert Buddhist is not that Buddhism is this, kind of monolith that it's not a, you've got to convert and erase everything that, all the whatever gods that you have, but rather actually there is a pantheon of devas within Buddhism, and it can match quite easily, especially in Catholicism, since we have a saint every day. Lots of different devas, they all do trippy things. Actually, also the, how do you call it, what we were talking about yesterday, like all the realms of existence. You take the Divine Comedy from Dante Alighieri, very easily mapped. You can map it very much. There's a lot of crossover with Buddhist cosmology. So there's a lot of interesting things. Also, Mother Mary and Guanyin Bodhisattva. A lot of times, even Italians get confused. Like my parents actually have Guanyin Bodhisattva painting in their home without really knowing that it's not Mother Mary or it's Mother Mary, and vice versa. Actually, you can find the same thing with we actually, since this Empty Cloud Monastery used to be a Catholic monastery, at the very beginning we had a statue of Mother Mary before we donated it to the community of nuns, Catholic nuns of the Augustinian order. And yeah, some Buddhists thought it was Guanyin Bodhisattva. So there's actually more crossover than one can think. There's also trippy things like the Trinity, that, it's like non-duality. So yeah, I would say it can be an interesting way to explore where, there's Buddhism can actually help you be a better Catholic. And Geeta says, Bante Sumita, we hope that all your family is safe in Sri Lanka. The COVID-19 situation is out of control. It's very sad. We pray for everyone's safety.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geeta. And Durani asks, what is Shikantaza?
I think I already answered that, didn't I? So Shikantaza, it literally means only sitting, and it refers to the practice of animitta samadhi, what we call in Pali animitta samadhi. So meditation with no object. So rather than focusing on anything in particular, You're just sitting there and letting go of all phenomena, letting go of everything, letting go of every object that appears to any of your senses, letting go of every thought and concept of reality, letting go of every perception, every relationship to self and other. So it's called only sitting because in theory you're not doing anything whatsoever at all with the mind. You're just letting your body sit there as you let go of all phenomena. So that's why it's called only sitting.
Yeah. And Yudi follows up with a question on the devas. And says that doesn't answer my question. Perhaps it isn't control, but rather enjoy.
No, it's definitely control. The Pali word is para, other, nimitta, created, vasavatti, controls. So par nimitta vasavatti is a deva who controls things that have been created by others. So it helps to understand that the deva realm one step below that is the nimmana rati devas. So nimmana means creating and rati means enjoying. So the nimmana rati devas are the devas who enjoy creating things. So it's said that those devas have the ability to mentally create any kind of object that they want. So this is the psychic power that I think the English word is psychogenesis, the ability to create a physical object by force of mind alone. So these devas have the ability to create anything they want, any kind of physical object or physical experience that they want. So that's their happiness. Their happiness is generating imaginary worlds and living in them. So if you're the kind of person who likes daydreaming, then the nimmana rati realm is your cup of tea because you get to create all kinds of interesting experiences and live through them. But there are more powerful devas who can infiltrate your dream world and control the things that you've created. They can influence your own creations. They can alter and twist and distort it as they wish. So this is why Mara is a paranimitta vasavati deva, because he can control the dream worlds of others. He can control the imaginings and concepts and ideas and experiences of others, even of the nimmana rati devas, the psychogenetic devas.
Great, thank you. Amatanasanti, good to see you. Amatanasanti has a technical question. If you want to send us an email, we're happy to share all that information. And Kumu says, recently I read the life story of Deepa Ma. Her life story is very inspirational for householders who want to follow the teachings practice. Could you please recommend any other biographies? Venerables?
I recommend every biography of any Buddhist monastic of any lineage. When I was a junior monastic, I actually spent a very long period of time, many months, where the only thing I was reading was biographies of Buddhist monastics. And it was just utterly delightful. So I recommend reading all the biographies of Buddhist monastics you can get your hands on. So any tradition, Theravada, Mahayana, Vajrayana. So there were some that really stuck out for me. One, of course, the biography of Ajahn Mun is just mind-blowing, especially if you're into Theravada, it's just mind-blowing. There was Footprints in the Snow, which was a Chan monk, a Chinese Zen monk who fled China during the communist insurgency. So that's a very interesting book. Biography of Thich Nhat Hanh is pretty good. A lot of the biographies of the Tibetan lamas who fled Tibet, those are also quite interesting. Yeah, I mean, there's lots. Basically, any biography of any Buddhist monastic is going to be interesting.
Forest Recollections is actually a compilation of a lot of different stories of the Thai forest tradition. I love that book. It's great. of course, the biography of Ajahn Chah, compiled by Ajahn Jayasaru in Thailand, is wonderful.
Yeah.
It's incredible. It's this thick, but
it's worth it.
yeah, worth every single page. One of the best, well, for fans of Ajahn Chah, but also for non-fans of Ajahn Chah. Yeah, it's pretty great. And Master Seng Yen's biography, I also really enjoyed. Bhante Smita, are there any books?
Yeah, I think you can also read the biographies of the great Buddhist monks of those days. Like if you read Theragatha, Therigatha, and if you read Udana, if you read some of the Jataka stories, and you will find so many wonderful people, and even the Buddha himself. And Dhammapadatta Katha has so many really wonderful stories, and how those monks were practicing, and how the other people were inspired, and all these things are really interesting. Plus, whenever you read the background story of many of the suttas, there are such wonderful stories of those very simple, very, very wonderful monks and nuns. So I recommend when you go through those suttas, you will also find the biographies of real arhanta, real enlightened ones. In contemporary world, I would also like to suggest, in Sri Lanka we had Balangada Ananda Maitreya Nayaka Thero. We had Rerukani Chandavimala Nayaka Thero. We had quite a few monks in the recent past that we really, really respect. And also Bhante Nauyani Arya Dhamma Nayaka Thero, who very recently passed away. And so their stories, their life, their biographies are very, very fascinating and inspiring. I always like to read them too. And sometimes when things go wrong in the country, like maybe some famines happen, how they still dedicated their life and energy to preserve the Dhamma. It's really amazing. We have so many wonderful stories like that. Asarana Sarana Saranankara, what we call Bhante Saranankara. And there are so many inspiring characters. And Dalai Lama, Venerable Dalai Lama is a really wonderful character too. I also like the story of Thich Nhat Hanh, Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh, and many other current, and also Fo Guang Chan founder, Master Xing Ying. I really like his life story too. So if you read, you will, as Bhante Sudarshan mentioned, all those stories, they are like Myanmar. We have, I think, if you can talk about Mahasi Sayadaw, and then we also have Sayadaw Ji in Pauk tradition, Sayadaw Pauk, and they are living. I think Sayadaw Pauk is still living. Such a tremendously powerful monk. You can see his followers and his tradition, and even the story of Goenkaji, very, very wonderful, and how they have dedicated their life, how they have inspired themselves, out of no reason sometimes, out of something like personal experience sometimes, they have found the light in the Buddha Dhamma.
Thank you, Bhante. And Vita asks, follows up with you. I'm also interested in this. Balangada Ananda Mahatero taught Venerable Body. Bhante Smith, is this available in English?
I think he was well versed in quite a few languages. And the story, I read one of his books, Balangoda Ananda Maitreya Nayaka Thero's one book called The Life of the Buddha. It's a very thick book. I am not sure if it is in English, but I found some teachings of him. I'm still not sure we do have so many English translations, unfortunately. Venerable Therukani Chandavimala Nayaka Thero has written so many wonderful, wonderful books, but most of them, I think almost all of them, are in Sinhala. And unlike those Ajahn Chah and other Thai forest monks, unfortunately, we don't have such wonderful people from the West to go learn Sinhala and translate. And I think Katukurunda Jnanananda Nayakathera, who just passed away very recently, another really, really wonderful one. He has written so many books in Sinhala, but we do have a few books in English too about Katukurunda Jnanananda Nayakathera.
Yes, so public service announcement. If you know both Sinhala and English, which, I mean, I know you do because you're here watching. I know that you're from Sri Lanka and we're speaking in English, so you all qualify. Gita, Kumu. So you can, there's a great meritorious opportunity to translate biographies, to translate teachings.
Are they from Sri Lanka?
Yes, Gita is from Sri Lanka, and so is Kumu. I definitely know the two of them. And then there is also our friend, another friend that also, she's not here right now, but another friend that actually logs in from Sri Lanka all the time. So, and BC asks, what are some tips you could give someone setting sights on going forth, finding a monastery preceptor most conducive to their development? I guess we can all give tips. We can all answer.
Well, to be honest, I would say that the number one thing that you're looking for as somebody who's seeking to begin a monastic life, the main thing you're looking for is a monastery that will give you a thorough training in the basics of being a monk. So don't necessarily try to find the perfect meditation teacher, or even necessarily a monastery that you want to spend many, many years in. But rather look for a place which is, first off, its primary purpose is training new monks. So there's a lot of different kinds of monasteries. So there are some monasteries where their purpose is for training new monks, and there's other monasteries which are meant for monks who are already trained and who want to do other things with their monastic life, maybe give Dhamma talks or engage in a lot of personal meditation practice or some such. And those monasteries are great, but they're not usually good places to start out. So you want to look for a place that it's got a pretty solid schedule, a pretty solid training program, pretty good resident community who can help you learn the basics. That's what you're looking for. So places that will teach you the Vinaya, that will teach you the basics of meditation practice, and a place where you have to live with other people and interact with other community members. One of the biggest trainings that you get in monastic life is just learning how to get along with the other monastics, which is remarkably challenging. So just learning how to be kind and friendly and tolerant of your fellow monastics is incredibly powerful training and an ongoing process. But yeah, a monastery which will give you a lot of Vinaya training is very important. It's not enough just to get ordained and put on a robe and call yourself a monk. That doesn't do you much good. You might look like a monk from the outside, but if you don't deeply transform your own heart, then you're not a monk. You're just somebody who looks like a monk. So a monastery which will really deeply train you in what it means to be a monk from the inside out, and will give you a very thorough instruction in Vinaya. So if you're living in a Western country and your primary language is English and you're male, then you actually have a lot of really good options. So the Ajahn Chah tradition has a lot of really good monasteries in Western countries, including some in Europe for non-English speakers. If you speak Italian or Portuguese or German, there's some good options for you as well. If you speak English, there's many options in North America and Australia and England. And of course, you can go to Asia if you want immersive experience. So depending on where you live in the world, I could give some more specific recommendations. Yeah, those are the main things you're looking for. Don't look for a place that's caught up in social activism or caught up in a lot of community engagement and so on. Those are fine things to do after you've had your basic training, but you don't want to be distracted from your basic training for those first few years. So you want a monastery where its primary purpose is training new monastics. Okay?
Bante, that's pretty comprehensive. Do you have anything to add, Bante Sumita?
Yeah, I think it's very important to think of the real training. Without training, if you become a monk, you will actually be at a loss. Like imagine you have a job here and you are working and you have so many things in your daily life, mundane activities. You are very busy. Maybe you are an actor, maybe you are a singer, maybe male or female, a model, maybe whatever. That why do you want to become a monk or a nun? Then you have to think. Then if you want to become a monk or a nun, it's a completely different lifestyle. So you don't want to do the same thing wearing the robe, right? So it's very important you give priority to the Vinaya. Vinayo nama sasana sa ayu, the lifeline of this sasana is the Vinaya, the code of conduct. As a layperson, you just have to follow 5 precepts, 8 precepts, or 10 precepts. But once you become a samanera, you have 10 precepts and you can break any of them. And then once you become a full-fledged monk, a bhikkhu, you have 227 rules. That's a lot of rules, a lot of things that you have to really be serious of. And training is very important. Training under a what do you call very good place in the West. Bhante Sudaso mentioned, and I think yes. So some of the places. I'm not sure if Bhante Gunaratana this place also is providing that training.
These days, I don't think so. In the
Okay.
past, he was,
He used
but
to
I
do,
think
right?
these days he's not training junior monks anymore.
Yeah.
The other monastics are. He definitely isn't, because
Hmm.
he's 95.
Yeah, that's right. And if you go to Asia, you have so many options in India, in Sri Lanka, in Thailand, in Myanmar, and also depending on the tradition you want to practice. And even in those countries, there are forest traditions and there are like Gramavasi, what do you call, community-based temples. You really have to do some research before becoming a monk. Yeah, good luck to you.
Thank you, Bante. And BC actually says they were in New Zealand. Isn't there I think there's an Ajahn Chah monastery in New Zealand, and definitely in Australia next door. You have a lot of different monasteries. I'm not quite sure I think if you're from New Zealand, you can have more access to monasteries. Definitely all of Ajahn Brahm's monasteries are an option, but I've heard that there's a bit of a waiting list of a few years.
There is a couple Ajahn Chah monasteries in New Zealand. One of them is more of a small hermitage for fully trained monks, but there's one that is for training junior monks, at least as of a few years ago. I don't know what they're doing these days. So it's called Bodhinyana. So not to be confused with Bodhinyana in Australia. There's Bodhinyana in New Zealand, which last I checked was a place for training new monks. So you might check out that place. I think it's near Wellington, if I recall correctly.
Great. anyway, you have a lot of options, basically. And Putrika is our friend from Sri Lanka that I was trying to remember the name earlier. So Putrika, we also give you an assignment of translating books from Sinhala to English. Well, we didn't give you an assignment, but there's a meritorious opportunity since we have many books from Thai to English, but very few from Sinhala to English. And there's not any other questions popping up unless our residents have something else.
I always have questions.
Great.
What do you think is the best method for a layperson who wants to practice somewhat seriously? I know some traditions like Zen have like formal student-teacher relationships for people. I don't really know about other traditions. What would you recommend?
Well, it depends on what you want. So if you want to have a teacher-student relationship, well, the way you do that is you just keep going to the same teacher and you keep asking them questions. So you don't necessarily need to like sign a contract in blood. You just keep going to the same teacher and asking them questions, and the relationship develops from that. So in some traditions, they do formalize that. And actually in some Theravada monasteries, it's formalized. But often it's just informal. The teacher that you like to ask questions of the most is your formal teacher, your informal, formal teacher. Yeah, and as what to do as a layperson, practice renunciation, practice morality, practice generosity, meditate a lot, try not to get wrapped up in worldly things. So you need a livelihood to pay your bills, but try to live a minimalist lifestyle. And prioritize Buddhist practice above everything else. So your priority is no longer going to parties and nightclubs. Your priority is not getting the right romantic partner or partners or one-night stands or whatever. Your priority is not getting intoxicated. Your priority is not wealth, none of that. Your priority is Buddhist practice. And actually, if you think in that way, then the path is always clear to you. When faced with any choice, ask yourself, which choice is more in line with the Buddhist teachings? Which choice leads towards awakening? And take that choice. It's actually very simple.
Wouldn't that lead everyone to becoming a monastic?
That is a very unrealistic and unlikely outcome. But yeah, it's true. If you commit 100% to Buddhist practice, there's a very good chance that you're going to wind up in monasteries. Very good chance, especially if you're relatively young, relatively healthy, and relatively sane, which I think you check every box on that. Then yeah, if you really want to commit 100%, then start living at monasteries. Set aside everything else, at least for periods of time. Take 3 months and spend 3 months in just living in monasteries. And that will give you a pretty good sense as to whether or not you want to become a monastic.
It's also worth noting, so that in Buddhist countries, the majority of people are not monastics. So you can also, value the path as the foremost, and practice at your best in the conditions where you are. So the form is only important when it's supportive to the goal, to the objective, but there's so many different things that one needs to develop. So once you know that you want to be a monastic, you'll know that you want to be a monastic. But it's not that, as the Buddha says, if all it took to attain awakening was to get robes, then every single baby that would be born would be wrapped up in robes, and you have a world of enlightened beings. So yeah, start. As Bhante said, like really practicing fully, really treasuring the triple gem, Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. And then, will come, at least that was my experience. after a while, then I was actually practicing like a monastic, living like a monastic. So I was like, okay, well, maybe I'll just become a monastic. Makes sense. But not starting with the idea that's the only way. Either, I practice like a monastic, or I get drunk and wasted every day. Like, there's not, it's not, it doesn't have to be that extreme. And there's so many different wholesome qualities of mind that need to be developed, and a lot of merit, actually. I practiced like for 4 years as a layperson before putting these robes, just catching up with my fellow Asian Buddhists, making merit. They do it since they're born. So there's lots of, giving, generosity to be cultivated in the mind, and also faith that this path is really valuable. Yeah. So give yourself some time. And we have a few questions that have popped up. I don't know which one to say. And BC says, I just visited Bodhinyana in Wellington. Okay, wonderful, great. Anne Martani says, what to do when I have tension headache after meditation?
What to do with you when you have a headache?
After meditation.
After meditation.
Yeah.
Oh. So I think when you meditate, your headache will be gone. Most of the time, it is the case. And when you meditate, if you have headache, just that will be the best object of meditation for you. You think of the pain and see how it works, whether it is permanent, or whether it is like which part of the head that is paining, and how long it sustains. And you can just think, and the intensity of the pain, and if you keep thinking, trying to ground zero that one, and hopefully you will also see it is constantly changing, the intensity, and it's not permanent. And you can also think whether it can be turned into a vipassana meditation, in fact, whether the pain is mine, or whether the pain is permanent, or whether the pain is myself. And so if you keep thinking of that, that will become a very powerful meditation too. I recommend when you meditate anapanasati, I notice many of those simple things like simple headaches and other things will be completely gone. And the story of Goenka, he had a very, very serious headache, and he was a very rich man, wealthy man, businessman. He went all around the world trying to find medicine, and eventually he found a meditation master in Myanmar, and he did meditation. His headache was gone, and ever since he completely dedicated his life and energy to promote, to cultivate, to propagate the Buddhist meditation. And then he went to India, and he started this Goenka Vipassana Training Center in Igatpuri, where 5,000 I think practitioners could practice there in one single place. And around the world, so many people were also practicing under his guidance. So yeah, so you can practice, and loving kindness also is a good one. Anapanasati, I think, is very helpful.
And also, just to add to that, make sure you're very relaxed when you meditate. Sometimes when people are practicing meditation, they're trying so hard to concentrate that they wind up tensing up their body, and that tension can cause headaches. So make sure you're very relaxed so that this problem doesn't happen.
All right, thank you, Venerables. And Pial asks, this is Indy. I really would like to know what you think of ordaining young kids, which is a practice in South Asia, for example, Sri Lanka. Well, actually, Bhante Sumitra was ordained as a child, and he's a wonderful monk, and we're very happy to have him here at Empty Cloud Monastery. Also, Bhante Ji was ordained as a young child, right? Like
Yeah, it was 10 or 11 or
10,
something.
11.
Yeah.
Also, incredibly wonderful monk. So I think it's an incredible, great tradition. And actually, had I had that opportunity at the age of 10 or 11, and to ordain as a female monk, a female Buddhist monk, that would have been wonderful. Instead of getting depressed and spending all those horrible years in high school, hating myself, hating others, I could have actually had the opportunity to develop the mind, learn the teachings of the Buddha, and become a better person. Wonderful, and then if people see that when they grow up that that's not the path that they want to do, there's always the option of disrobing. So like in Buddhism, we have the option of disrobing. It's a little bit different, I heard, in Catholic monasticism. You're supposed to not disrobe at all. But with the Vinaya, actually, there's it's totally voluntary. And I would also say that my understanding is also that being born to begin with in a Buddhist country is incredible good karma from the past. So there are incredible children. Actually, Bhante Sumitra was showing us this young girl, Sachi Samad. Yeah, that is very young, a couple years old, and she already gives Dhamma talks. So yes, all in Singhala, unfortunately. We all need to learn Singhala because we're missing out on a lot of Buddhism. But yeah, like incredible, how wonderful. And so you see that's clearly past karma. And someone like that, doesn't need to wait to pursue the aspiration. They're clearly already, somewhat accomplished in the path. So the earlier, the better, I would say. So I'm lots of thumbs up for ordination at any time.
Yeah, again, I would say look at the results. So if you had asked me this question before I had met any monks who had been ordained as young kids, I probably would have said that sounds like a terrible idea. So giving ordination to someone who's 11 or 12 years old, I would have said, oh, that sounds really stupid. But I've met so many incredibly wonderful monks who became monks when they were 10, 11, 12, 13 years old. And they turned into such incredible practitioners who have done so much good both for themselves and for others. So the results speak for themselves. And the results are that this practice of giving ordination to people, and again around that time of their life, so young people around that age, the results are really good. The results speak for themselves. So overall, I think it's you may sometimes wind up ordaining somebody who really isn't suitable for monastic life. I'm sure that happens, but you also wind up creating a lot of really wonderful monks. So overall, I think it's worth it.
I mean, the unsuitable also happen if they're adults. So
yeah, that's for sure.
And maybe Bhante Sumitra can share, since
I think in traditional Buddhist country, it's very natural. Like at least one out of every family becomes a monk. Those days we had big families. My family, we had 7 siblings, so it was easier for one to become a monk. And the monks also those days, I remember, they were searching for eligible children to train themselves as monks. And if you have a good temple, if you have a good teacher, and if you have that training as a young child, so much the better, because the things that I have learned those days when I was 11, trust me, I still remember. That's amazing. Like things that I have learned maybe a couple of years ago, I forgot. But those days when I was a young monk, I learned so many wonderful. Every single day we had to learn the suttas by heart. If you are an older person with so much, clogs in your clouds in your mind, it's very hard. But those days we were so free, like empty clouds. Whatever we read, we remember. I used to remember, learn the Dhammapada 26 chapters in 26 days. Everything learned by heart. I learned all those Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta, Attanatiya Sutta, Mahasamaya Sutta, and all those long suttas, the entire sutta by heart. It was not difficult for me. And I learned also Pali, Sanskrit, and other things too. So that was a wonderful, I think, way to begin with. We can become wonder kids if you want to become a monk at that age. And imagine there are so many wonderful monks learning the Dhamma, practicing the Dhamma, and working for the benefit of the many. So that is really, and for themselves and also for the others. If you see a lot of Tibetan temples, they have even more younger children becoming lamas. And if you go to Myanmar, you can also see those very pretty cute children becoming Samanera monks. Whether they are going to sustain for the rest of their life is up to them. Maybe they are karma or whatever. And even in Thailand, even in Laos, the other countries, India, now it's more. And those days also, we had like, this is thousands of years old tradition. So Buddhism came to Sri Lanka 236 BC. So ever since it was the main religion, even today in Sri Lanka. So that tradition, the culture is amazingly powerful.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Thank you, Bante. And Priyal says, when practicing sensory restraint, it is said that not to pay attention to detail. What does it really mean? Bante Sudaso?
So it means not fixating on things. So whatever you see or hear or smell or taste or touch, or whatever thoughts appear in the mind, you're aware of them, but you don't take any interest in them. You recognize that these things are unimportant. They're not worth obsessing about. They're not worth pointing your mind towards them. So this is sensory restraint. Sensory restraint is not directing the mind towards anything that appears through any of your senses, unless it's something that's important to your task. So for example, if right now you're sweeping the floor, then you need to pay attention to the broom and you need to pay attention to the floor. And you also need to pay attention to your body to some extent. And you also need to have some awareness of your surroundings so you don't, for example, hit one of the other monks with the broom. But that's it. You don't need to pay attention to anything else. If a car drives by blasting loud music, well, you don't need to pay any attention to that because it's not important to you. So sensory restraint means you don't direct your mind towards anything trivial. And trivial means basically everything other than what you're currently doing. So that's what is meant by not paying attention to detail. I think the Pali not nimittagahi, so not seizing at any object, not grabbing any object. So usually when we see or hear or smell something interesting, and interesting means either we like it or we dislike it. Normally we grab it. So we're practicing not grabbing any sensory object. We just let it float through the mind without paying any attention to it, without getting interested in it. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, so nanimittagahi means not grabbing any sensory object. And na anuganjanagahi means not latching on to the details of anything, the characteristics of anything. Yeah. In other words, just don't take an interest in it. It's not important. It's trivial, insignificant.
Right, that was the last question. Anything else in people's minds? All right. Okay. All right. Well, then maybe that's all for this evening. Thank you all for joining us. So we will be tomorrow morning at 10:30 a.m. There will be Venerable Sakya Dhammadinam from India, who will be sharing the second session on the Abhidhamma, Introduction to the Abhidhamma. She will be live streaming from India, so very exciting. She's a great bhikkhuni. Then at 6 p.m. there will be our evening talk here at Empty Cloud Monastery on the Yard will be live streamed. We hope that Bhante Sumita will be sharing some Dhamma tomorrow. And then on Sunday there's the Upasaka, so there will be several different live streams as well, and we'll be taking the precepts together and practicing. Also, if you are in New Jersey, you are welcome to come to in person at Empty Cloud Monastery, and we'll be practicing the whole day meditation. Then next week, the Sangha here at Empty Cloud will be going on retreat, so there won't be live streams from Empty Cloud, but there will be our usual guest live stream. So Shifu Simplicity on Wednesday morning at 8 a.m. And then there will be a blast from the past. John Punadamo is a great Thai forest monk who lives in Canada, who shared several different teachings in the past, retreats with Buddhist insights. So we're broadcasting some of his teachings starting like basically at all the different, Wednesday evening, Thursday morning, Thursday evening, and Friday morning, same times, 8 a.m., 7:30 p.m. There's also a bonus one at 1 p.m. on Thursday. And then we'll see you again for monk chat. And good to see you, Diana. We miss you too. Diana was here as a resident a few weeks ago. All right, so may you all be well and happy, and may all good things come to you. We can end with 3 sadhus.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.